Hello, welcome to the second episode of Cultural Bourgeoisie. My name is Jyoti Rahman. I am an economist by trade and executive editor of Counterpoint. I watch and read a lot of books and movies and like to talk about them. And I've got with me Ehtesham. Ehtesham, introduce yourself and tell us about Cultural Bourgeoisie, who we are and what is Cultural Bourgeoisie.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jyoti Bhai. So, I am a lawyer based out of DC in the States. You and I have talked about pop culture for a long time, bored those around us to tears, and our tastes are squarely in the mainstream, conventional. We have very broad and vanilla tastes. So I think, in a word, we are bourgeoisie. So that's why I think this name is apt for us.
And we are suburban dads, so there is that bit too, right? So okay, so we are bourgeoisie, and we have very bourgeois tastes in cultural things, and that's what we want to talk about. Last episode we talked about Satyajit Ray and his his Bengali bhadralok sleuth, Feluda. What are we going to talk about this week?
We are delving into deeper things, Jyotibhai. Things are about to get real. We are going to talk about the ravages of colonialism. We will start with a Frederick Forsyth book that I think is well known to many of us. Uh, Probably a lot of us read it during our schoolboy days. To get the bitter taste of it out of our mouth, we will jump to a 2019 more recent work of fiction that is sort of the mirror image of the Frederick Forsyth book and takes a more appropriate, more attuned to our sensibilities look to the world of espionage and what superpowers have to do in the developing world. And then we will end up back in Bangladesh, talking about an event that passed that all of us are familiar with, the 45th death anniversary of late President Shohid Ziaur Rahman, and this book, Didiyo Khuner Kahini.
Okay, and the title of our episode is when history reads like a thriller. So let me quickly. No, that's not how we want. So title of our episode, this episode is when history reads like a thriller. So we're going to talk about three thriller books, no movies, although Dogs of War had been made into a not so good movie, but we're not going to talk about the movie. We're going to talk about three thriller books. That's a mouthful. Three thriller books. Uh, and but they do have historical basis, more or less, and so therefore the title is when history reads like a thriller. Okay, Dogs of War. The Dogs of War itself, the name itself has a historical basis, doesn't it?
It does. Goes back in the days. Tell me about it.
So it's from Shakespeare, right? It's it's from the play Julius Caesar, where Caesar himself has actually does not play a part. Caesar himself has been assassinated, and it's after that Mark Antony is with Caesar's body. He is it's his soliloquy. I think his wondering what to do, and uh, his next moves, his grieving, and his scheming is probably the wrong. Well, maybe scheming. He's thinking of his next actions, and and then he says that, well, if this is how things are going to be, then let's sleep the dogs of war, right? Cry havoc and let's sleep the dogs of war. So that's what the phrase comes from, right?
Absolutely.
And it's in modern parlance, it's referred to mercenaries. Is that right?
It is referring to mercenaries who make up a large portion of this Forsyth book and are present in a different context in the American Spy book, where we will call them by the much more refined term of contractors.
Right. So tell us about the Foresight book.
Where to start? So, Frederick Forsyth, was a familiar presence to us in our school days. You read Jeffrey Archer, the girls read Sidney Sheldon, and then when you were done with Jeffrey Archer, you read Frederick Forsyth.
Oh, well, that's a bit of
Yes,
gendered comment. Girls read said Sheldon. So we'll let that pass. Let that pass for now. But sure.
thank you,
Okay.
thank you. So Forsyth, of course, is best known for Day of the Jackal, which is, like genuinely a good book. It's something very new that came out for that time. Forsyth was a pilot in the Royal Air Force. Um, After the end of the Second World War, when the world started changing and the British Empire started going back to being a sad little island on the edge of the Atlantic, he did what maybe a couple of generations ago he would have been a colonial administrator. He tried to do what was left to him, which was be a war correspondent and go to all these conflict zones and really get a sense of the culture there. So the essence of Dogs of War is there needs to be a coup in a African country. The country is made up. Forsyth goes to great pains to take away as much agency from the country and its people as possible. There is one palace, it's guarded by one unit of guards, there is one road, there's one approach, no one else, there are no opposition figures, there's no politics. The president is a madman slash monster, and the people of that country are infantilized and left without agency. And basically, it's up to the Western nations to do what they want with this country. The immediate context is there's a British mining company that has discovered platinum. So instead of trying to negotiate a deal with the government that's maybe shown to be a little friendly to Moscow, they will install their own government. And therefore, the mining company puts together a mercenary group, tells them to take out the government, and you have the titular Dogs of War.
Yeah. So it's a bit more, right? That the book says that the president is a madman, but is also Marxist, as in he's a mad commie, to put
Well,
bluntly.
I mean,
and
if
and
I
and they want to
go,
put in power their own madman, like a mad gorilla, or a beast. And they actually use those terms, don't they? I
they
mean,
do,
shockingly racist, but they actually
they
do
do.
use those kind of terms, right?
The racism lies thick with this book, and you need to like go rinse with mouthwash after reading it. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But if you look at the meta text, they had to make him a communist because if he was one of those pro-Western dictators like Papa Duvalier,
Well, not
Rawlins.
in Africa, but sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But there were
Then,
also pro-Western dictators in Africa.
right. Then you wouldn't
Um,
need
yeah,
Mobu's.
Mobutu Sese Seko
Right.
in Zaire and so on. Yeah.
Then you wouldn't need a coup.
Mhm.
So the guy had to be anti-Western. And then basically, I guess Forsyth's tool of trade is he goes into excruciating details about how to charter a boat, how to get a license, how.
Just pause for a quick sec. The For the viewers, we make no apologies for giving out spoilers because the books and movies that we talk about are not latest hits. So I think I think it's bad form to give out spoiler. On something that's playing in the theater right now, because people should have some time to go and watch the movie. But if there is a book that's out for 40 years, 50 years, and if you haven't read it, um, well, you know, yeah.
Shame
So
on
we are
you.
going to be spoilers. Yeah. Okay. Go on. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Stop book.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel
Go on.
like that's his strategy for padding his page count. He like drones on and on and on about mercenaries, and they're all very generic stereotypes. There's the big tough guy whose name is Tiny, and then there's the Frenchman who keeps sharpening his knife, and there's the bluff, South Africaner, and of course they're led by someone from the UK.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you can see that, these characters, I mean, would show up in movies like Predator and Expendables and so on. That, these kind of stock characters that, any group of 5 or 10 mercenaries, contractors would have this kind of thing. Like, yeah, somebody will keep sharpening their knives, somebody would keep looking grimly and Takishon, sort of into the into the sky. Somebody would be talking nonsense all the time and would be told, "Shut up, you fool," and so on. Right? I mean,
someone is
yeah,
humming all the time one
that's
particular
right.
tune, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So if anyone ever has quibble about the days of imperialism or why our forefathers kicked out the British, please read this book and you'll get a sense of what their worldview was towards colored people.
Yeah. And yet, I so no, I agree with all of those things, right? Um, and yet, I would say two things. One is that the ending, so the other stock of trade that Forsyth has is the plot twist right at the end. And I thought that the plot twist in this was actually um, better than many of his other ones, including Day of the Jackal,
Mm.
which, by the way, the Masud Rana version I think was actually better, much better crafted. Um, I mean, Day of the Jackal has weird uh, um, middle of the story turns. I mean, okay, here you have this really committed assassin. What the hell is he doing? Going on having a
Right.
weird,
Yes.
sexual escapade. I mean, what the hell
Right.
is that about? I mean, why are you
Right.
having a thing in the middle of the thing? You have to kill the, Charles de Gaulle, right? I mean, mission man. None of that happens
Don't they
here,
weave
right?
it in the story as to explain that's how he gets through the checkpoint? Like the other person, like,
Yeah, come on. It seemed that seemed like, a weird way of padding out your page count, right?
right.
Whereas here at this, there was a that yeah, you are padding out your page count, but at least you are padding it out with things that probably these characters actually do, right? So but yeah, but the other thing is that and as we'll see and we'll talk about in the other books later, that the assault on the presidential palace, the actual, so one thing is the plot twist at the end, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But the other thing, as we'll see when we talk about the other two books, and the assault on the presidential palace. When we think about military coups that actually happen, military coups that actually did happen in our country, in Bangladesh, tragically killing two of our presidents. This is actually how probably military coup, I mean, the actual act of bloody military coups are kind of like this, right? Those things are, those action sequences, I mean, like, you can see that this guy actually has done his research, that this is how you lead the, your your assault troops up the road, and this is how blow up your guards, and this is how you do your things.
So, two thoughts. One is I want to make clear that our military coups are not limited to the two times our presidents were killed.
No, we
We
have we
have
have a far
military
broader.
coups much more
We,
recently in the past.
true, true. We have a much broader report here, right?
Right.
Yeah, but the ones that killed our presidents were kind of like this in
Except,
their actual in their actual action of killing, not the broader part. As in, like, there were other elements too.
right. And no outside
Mercenaries,
forces were needed, no mercenaries were needed,
absolutely. Yeah.
no non-army people were needed. It
No,
was
no, that's
who
also
killed the
true.
family, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. No. That's right. That's right. But so our dogs were not foreign dogs. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to give out the spoiler for Sid book, or do you want to leave it for the readers?
No, we take no mercy, no prisoners. But I'll let you actually give the spoiler.
Okay. So here, the spoiler is that the the white savior mercenary installs a pan-Africanist nationalist in power. So, so it's neither the Soviet-backed madman nor the Western mining giant-backed beast,
Mhm.
but a pan-Africanist nationalist general who's installed by these two-gooding um, uh, white mercenary. Again, not at all a liberationist story as such, as in, it's still white savior complex, uh, but it's still a plot twist. It's the 70s was a time of African nationalism. This was still a time of post-colonialism, still when independence movement and their promises were um, felt in, the promises of nationalism still were felt. There were still hope in the continent and beyond, including in Bangladesh and elsewhere, right?
Right.
So, sort of that nationalism, post-colonialism, uh, sort of those hopes were still bright. They shone still brightly for people. 70s, apartheid still was present. South Africa was still under apartheid. I think
Right.
I'm pretty sure that Dogs of War came out. Zimbabwe was still under white rule, so the freedom
Rhodesia.
struggle. Rhodesia was still fighting for freedom. I think I think war had already ended in Angola and Mozambique by then, but just had ended probably. So the Portuguese had probably just had left not long before. So Southern Africa was still either still fighting for freedom, or
Mm.
freedom had just gotten there. uh, Much of West Africa was still in turmoil. Zangaro, where this is based was supposedly based on Equatorial Guinea,
Hmm.
um, which um, is a real country and has a lot of mineral resources and family dictatorships and mercenary-led coups and counter coups and so on. Mercenaries are still a feature in large parts of Africa. The mercenaries had actually ran many small African countries. In Central African Republic right now, Russian mercenaries apparently practically run the country.
The
Comoros is an
famous Wagner group.
famous Wagner group. Yeah, Comoros is a small island country in Indian Ocean that used to be run by a famous French mercenary called Depard. I don't know if that's his real name or nom de guerre, but yeah, he styled himself as commander of that island country for many years. So yeah, sort of there is a lot of real things about Dogs of War, but the book itself is fictitious.
Correct. And just to note that the Pan African savior is not given a name.
It's not given a name. That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. Yeah. But the
Slightly off
next,
tangent.
yeah.
Sorry,
Yes. Go.
for 90 seconds, Humayun Ahmed had a similar book. Have you read it?
No, tell me.
I It's one
I
of
didn't.
the earliest books I read that he had written, and it really made an impact because it was so unlike anything else he had written. I think his book was based on Julius Nyerere, and like how the Western powers like conspired to take him out, and the way Dogs of War starts, like the leader is sort of defeated but waiting to go into exile. That's how his book starts as well. But
Hmm.
of course, it has a very poignant and tragic end. And I mean, Humayun Ahmed was a very good author. And here he really pulled out all the stops. Like you could tell he was feeling the 70s Josh of Pan African, Pan Arabic, you know,
Okay.
solidarity.
But Julius Nyerere actually, okay, no, I had never even heard about this book, but Nyerere himself actually lived until his old age and
Then maybe
um,
Patrice Lubumba?
Lubumba probably,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because Nyerere was Tanzanian and
Okay.
yeah, and like yeah, like, lived until so had yeah, so Tanzania was one of the more peaceful parts of
Mm,
Africa um, in Nyarere's time. It avoided much of the turmoils that the neighboring countries had.
mm,
So it it did not grow economically, but nor did it suffer any of the calamities either. So and Narere is actually revered for
mm.
managing that stability, peace and stability. But
Yes.
Lumumba probably might be who you're
The
referring to.
figure,
Who
right.
so he was the independence leader of Congo
Right.
and was killed pretty much within the sort of there were the Belgians had left the country was there was a lot of CIA
Yes.
American conspiracy mine there's a lot of mining interest there was Soviet and Chinese interference American interference civil war in eastern provinces Katanga a brutal civil war UN
Right.
interventions um, mercenaries, and Congo, as you know, the civil war has practically never ended, right? So,
Right.
and um, yeah, deep heart of Africa, heart of darkness.
Right. Which
Yeah.
I think underlines the fact that we need a Humayun Ahmed episode soon. But the two wars I think that are referenced in Dogs of War that are still ongoing are the civil war in Congo, and they talk a lot about wars in Sudan, South
That's right.
Sudan, and the
Yeah,
separatist movement there.
yeah.
So,
And both are still going on. The wars in Congo and wars in Sudan, in some form or other, had been going on forever. Yeah,
mm,
Africa's forever wars that no one outside the continent really pay much attention to. Sadly,
right.
yeah. Segue to our next book, also
Yes,
set in the continent but in a real country.
correct. And I actually, to my discredit, did not know much about the country of Burkina Faso. And, I learned a lot, and, it was very educational. But if I'm getting ahead of myself, do you want to take a little bit of time and set the stage for the next book
Uh,
and show the
so
cover?
show the cover. I show the cover, and then you can tell us about the book.
Perfect.
Okay. So we see the cover again. So here is the cover. It's American Spy. It's set in the very real life country of Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa. It's a formerly known as Upper Volta. That's how the French called it. Well, French called it in a French name, which I'm not going to pronounce because I can barely speak English, so I dare not speak French. It's on the upper end of the Volta River. That's why they called it Upper Volta. The name Burkina Faso means a land of upright people. The
Right.
name was given by President Thomas Sankara, who is um, a who's not the protagonist, but he is a major presence in the book, major character in the book. He was the
Right.
president of the country from 1983 to 1987, and the book is a novel is from 2019, and it is about his assassination in 1987. So
Mhm.
this is a real country. Thomas Sankara was a real life president of a real country who was really assassinated in a real CIA influenced or allegedly, CIA or American Western linked military coup in 1987. So all of that is, so Thomas Sankara was anti-West in the Cold War context, uh, and took on uh, positions that were in the Cold War context very much anti-West, and his successor government reversed a lot of those policies. So these are all, this is not realm of conspiracy theory. This is all established mainstream, historical facts. Um, so that's the background. Now tell us about the book.
So the book is a fun mirror image of Dogs of War, which is why I assume you cunningly chose this book as the second entree in this episode. It focuses on an African American FBI agent who grows up in New York, has the very classic 70s and 80s upbringing, going through the experience of middle class, really American life, while being an African American person. Her dad is a police officer. Her mother is from the island of Martinique. Am I
Yeah,
saying? Yeah. And, she has a sister who is her older sister and is really her idol. And a lot of the book is shaped by her reaction to her sister's death. The book starts with her struggling in the FBI and, sort of trying to find her place. President Sankara is in New York to give a speech at the UN, and she is drafted by the CIA to shadow him, infiltrate his circle, learn certain aspects of what he plans to do in the US and what affiliated revolutionary Black Panther light adjacent parties are doing regarding all these figures. She does so well that the CIA then sends her to Burkina Faso, um, where she becomes disillusioned. She learns about the true nature of her mission. She refuses to assassinate Sangara, I'm sorry, and instead kills her CIA handler. But the president is mowed down in the middle of a cabinet meeting by two trucks of soldiers sent by his vice president and very close friend, who then assumes power, Blaise Compaoré.
Right. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell is the book. Again, no spoiler. So it's a 2019 book. You can see how from say 1979 when Forsyth probably was writing his book to 2019, how the world has changed. That the white man saves poor dumb Africans is no longer
Right,
something that's like one would write. So so the corrective to that is something where a to kill an African president, you have to hire a femme fatale who has to be also a black African, but
right,
like sort of in yeah, um, and there's also Harlem jazz scene, right?
right.
So yeah, well,
And when our protagonist is in Africa, the book lays out very clearly that even between Africans and African Americans, there's such a huge gulf that, like people can tell, like just by looking at her, that no, you're not from here.
yeah,
You're from somewhere abroad. And no, those scenes and those descriptions read very realistic, and you can tell that they're written from like experience. And definitely a much different work of art from Dogs of War. Um, Less testosterone, I would say, more thoughtfulness, and really, some exploration of a lot of things like the intersection of race and power. Who are the people who are allowed in the positions of power? What the Hamilton popularized as the room where it happens. So, what do you have to do to be in the room where it happens? And what's the toll that these decisions take on you?
yeah, and the broader geopolitics also is a lot more nuanced, right?
Right,
That the 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 Americans are not monolithically good or bad either, right? So there is there's the obviously she's American, but
right,
she's as you put it, a first generation middle class or second generation middle class African American professional trying to make it, try to break into, smash a lot of glass ceilings. There's the race glass ceiling, there's a gender glass ceiling, and so on, right? In FBI, in the professional world, right?
right,
And then there are CIA, but then there may or may not be CIA. As like there are contractors, and there's the official CIA, and then there's
right,
the all sorts of murkiness, right? So this is a lot more nuanced, um, a lot more gray world. And that is probably how the real Cold War probably was. That there was and the real world even now probably is that there is there's the official policy. Well, who knows what the real world now is in the Trump world, but if anything, probably the Trump world is probably much simpler, right? Who knows
Mm,
that. Maybe it is actually much simpler in the sense that what Trump says is what the real world is. So maybe that's a better thing. But we don't want to talk about politics today.
no.
No. Okay. But the other thing I wanted to seek your thoughts on. So Thomas Sankara, right? You were saying that you did a bit of research on Burkina Faso and Sankara. Tell us about what you found and how that. What did you learn and how that compares with what we know about our own country?
So, no, I went down an internet rabbit hole and spent some hours, Firstly, as you said, Burkina Faso used to be called Upper Volta. So then what is Lower Volta or what is Volta? Volta is actually a river in Africa, which I didn't know. And then, the act of renaming a country, um, like a lot of people rename things, but the fact that it's still called Burkina Faso and the name, the demonym he gave to people of Burkina Faso, all those are still used, right? That's a testament to how forward looking the president was and how, like, he I think ignited this sense of dignity amongst his people that really outlived him. And the funny thing was, you were saying that a lot of his positions in the context of that time was anti Western. And I'm sure you're right. But reading today, a lot of it sounds like the classic austerity that IMF and World Bank are always telling the developing world to do, cut your budget. He is selling the presidential limousines. He is making all the government officials use economic class tickets. He's just decreasing expenses and trying to move resources into social services, into increasing education, increasing health. And I think at one point he said, which I checked and it's correct, like he led his country to have a surplus, which was a big
Without
turnaround.
an army program, by the way.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, all of those, were very impressive.
Yeah, and the emphasis on vaccines and primary healthcare and all of those things, right? Female healthcare and things like that. Uh, but in the context of the time, a lot of these things were sounded like, okay, these are all crazy pro-Soviet or anti-West things that you're doing. You're talking about, you know, hobnobbing with the likes of Gaddafi
Right.
yeah, like Castro's and um, whoever else were the Ceausescu's and the
Yeah,
likes of those. Yeah, yeah. And coming to New York and seeing Black Panthers or whoever were the rebel rousers of the time in the 80s, Black African movement. Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So of course, we too not so Sankara was in power 83 to 87. Few years before that, we too had a president who had visited New York and was feted then, and then was killed shortly thereafter in a military coup, which is the subject of our third book. Um,
Yeah.
do you want to tell us about the book, or do you want to pause a little bit and take a personal reflection, or how do we want to
Let's.
do it?
I can talk about the personal reflection super quick, and then talk about the book. Um, do you have that picture we talked about?
I do have the picture. So, viewers and listeners, obviously, we're talking about the assassination of President Ziaur Rahman. So, we're recording this. Today is in Ehtesham's time, it's
June 2nd.
June 2nd. For me, it's June 3rd. So, President Ziaur Rahman was assassinated 45 years ago, 30th of May in Chittagong. He at the time of his assassination, he was by that time he was no longer a military ruler. He was he had been a civilian president for 2 years by then,
Right.
two, 3 years by then.
Was it?
Well, the martial law had ended for 2 years. So, okay,
Right.
let's yeah, at least 2 years by then. He was in Chittagong for a political reason. He was visiting the port city for a BNP party related matter, not for a state reason. As in, he was not visiting in his capacity as the president. As that, it wasn't a presidential function. It was a BNP chairperson related matter. Um, he his he was killed by a group of army, a group of
Officers. Only
officers,
officers.
only officers, right? And the we'll find, it's very much like those books that you know they go up a single road and come, and then, throw grenades and then get down and shoot off and mow down with gunfire, those kind of things. um, so this was a tragedy both for the nation and and the history of our nation would have been very different. uh,
Right. People always say, like Bangladesh would be Singapore, Bangladesh would be London, etc. Had Ziaur Rahman stayed in the scene at least another 10 years or so, Bangladesh, I could have easily like caught up with Malaysia in terms of at least development and per capita income. So the picture we're seeing now has some background. Zia was actually supposed to, I think, go to Iran to, try to do conflict resolution during the Iran Iraq war. Instead, he has to fly to Chittagong to do a different type of dispute resolution between different intractable parties. Then Deputy Prime Minister Jamaluddin Ahmed and the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, Barrister Sultan Ahmed. Um, he had been going to Chittagong very regularly at that point because, in response to his various, foreign policy bold and assertive moves, and I think especially after, sort of taking the country firmly out of the Indo-Soviet axis, India responded by patronizing the Shanti Bahini in the hill tracts. And Zia, in response to that, made the Chittagong garrison the largest in Bangladesh, where I think by some counts, about half of the Bangladeshi army was stationed in Chittagong and the hill tracts. He would go there every month. He had posted to Chittagong the GOC Major General Abul Manzoor, who had started off as one of his closest friends, but then they had a falling out, which we'll talk about. But to come back to the fact that he went to Chittagong to, figure out this dispute, he took most of the BNP standing committee with him. So the late Dr. Bodrudoza Chaudhuri, who was then the General Secretary of BNP, the Secretary General of BNP, Barrister Nazmul Huda, and then the Vice President, Abdus Sattar, stayed back, as did Jamaluddin Sarkar. And this picture actually speaks to that. These are various BNP leaders bringing the dead body of Ziaur Rahman back from the military airplane. The person on the left, right beside, behind the uniformed figure, is my maternal grandfather, Professor Ehteshamul Haque, who was also a member of the standing committee. That night, they had found a room for him in the Bangladesh Steel Mill Circuit House. So he happened to be a little bit further away from the scene of the assassination. But he always used to share a story with us that the last night before Zia's murder, there had been a lot of nonstop talk. They come into dinner really late. President Zia had also very strict regulations that, the food and the protocol around him had to be very reasonable, to the extent that they ran out of meat when serving the guests. And he actually asked for a second serving, and they had to tell him, "Sir, sorry, we're out." So, to the end of his days, my grandfather would sort of like get very emotional telling this story. And, like he would say that it was his last dinner and we couldn't treat him properly. But, that's the personal, this tragedy impacted the whole country. So, thank you for indulging me. Let's return to the national dimensions of this assassination.
That's a very poignant story, Etesham. We, you know, uh, I thanks for sharing this with us. Ziaur Rahman's death, as you said, is very much a tragedy for Bangladesh. The ramifications of which still cast a shadow over us. Um, so we are, this is not a political show as such, so we're not going to get into the details of why Ziaur Rahman um, had to go through all of the political trouble of setting up BNP and all of that. Just note this, that uh, Thomas Sankara is very well known in the West for um, such that there is a spice thriller is based around his assassination. People like Patrice Lumumba or Murtala Muhammad and many other African leaders are also talked about in those manner.
Mhm.
And then many other African leaders are also denigrated in various manners, right? The politics of Ziaur Rahman and is not probably appreciated as much in the West, and that is a failure of Bangladeshi writers and intellectuals and opinion makers. Particularly because one particular reason is because we don't tell our story in English.
Mm.
Okay, so we remain parochial in our culture words and history words, talking to ourselves um, over our petty stories, and we don't talk about how, in the context of the 70s and 80s, in the post-colonial world, we too actually had. I mean, here was a guy who did not actually need to do any of these petty political fights in Chittagong. He could have actually continued to lead as a national liberator war hero. So Thomas Sankara was doing all of those things. He wasn't democratizing his country,
Right. In
right?
fact, that was the weakness which CIA was exploiting to attack him.
Right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. That then, and in the book, the book actually goes on at great length about Well, what about democracy? Democracy is important too. Why not? It's very important. It's very good that Sankara is actually doing all these things about health and education and so on. But don't you feel that people should have a say in all of these things? Well, Zia was giving people a lot of say in a lot of these things, and BNP was actually in doing a lot of those saying those things. BNP was doing what democratic political parties do, which is factionalism, and that's what politics is. Politics is having these factional fights, and those factional fights and factional problems need to be resolved. That's what politics is, and Zia was doing exactly that. Unfortunately, it did not end. I mean, it's a tragedy for us. This is a tragedy that Zia could have avoided by not being a Democrat. I'm not suggesting that he should have done that at all. So this is a story we should tell. We should tell the world. We haven't. That's our fault. Um,
Another commonality between both these stories is, you wonder why both these leaders didn't take their personal security as seriously. And I think they almost felt like there was a trade off. Like to be, like a politician who was accessible to the people and who could interact with leaders and grassroots activists, they had to really like decrease the security around them. And then, that ultimately had its very tragic consequences.
that may also be relevant for the current Prime Minister of Bangladesh, wouldn't you say? Particularly
Absolutely.
given, particularly given the fact that he had been in exile for many years and had not met many of the people of Bangladesh, most
Right.
of them. So again, we are straying into politics. Let's come back to the book, the third book. While I
Do you
bring
want
up
to
the
show the
book,
cover super
yeah,
quick?
I want to show the cover, and also my personal story is nowhere near as poignant as yours. But my first political memory um, is also around the assassination of Ziaur Rahman, which is I was I was about five, was actually less than five. We lived in Bogura at that time, where my father was the district engineer. And what I remember is that we were playing outside the house when my Choto Fupu, she was also sitting there with us, or I don't know, I don't remember what she was doing, but basically, uh, one of the neighbors' kids, boy, teenage, so her friend, I guess, came and told her that, you are still here. Haven't you heard that the president had been assassinated? Now, she was a very big fan of the president, as were, of course, many other people, but she was particularly because just a few months earlier, she had received a medal or something from the president.
Mhm.
Um, she was, I think
That's
she had just finished her HSC or SSC, like, she was of that age. So where getting that kind of president, that kind of medal from the president is like your life's biggest achievement, right? So she was she just like burst into tears, like what you would call in Bangla haumau kore kanna.
mhm.
Obviously, my mother and grandmother and everybody ran, like, what's happening, and she is like sobbing her heart out, and we are like like little kids, we're like all wondering what on earth has happened. Here we were all playing just like 2 minutes ago, and now Fupu is like beside herself. This goes on for like who knows how long.
Mhm.
Eventually she pulls herself together to manage to tell that the president has been killed, but obviously she has no other detail. This is 1981 in Bogota. There is nothing other than radio, right?
Right.
And so people then just run to tune into radio, and radio is just playing Quran Telawat, and so there you go. So that is my very first political memory.
Thank you for
Onto the book.
sharing.
Onto the
So,
book.
As you can see from the cover of the book, it prominently has the pictures of three military leaders who are the, sort of central characters of this book. Zia is assassinated in Chittagong. The
Like the
Jyoti,
Caesar, like
exactly,
Julius Caesar.
right. Um, just like Caesar and Brutus, Zia could not imagine Munzur acting in any way against him. The book talks about how Zia gets down from the plane. Munzur doesn't go to receive him at the airport, which is a huge breach of protocol, as you can imagine. And there is an exchange between Zia and the brigadier who Munzur sent. And Zia is, like, he's not angry, he's more like exasperated. And do you want to give the context about
Yeah,
why?
go on, go
Okay,
on.
so at this, Zia is the iconic freedom fighter of our history. He is the, leader of Z Force, sector commander, gave the declaration in the radio from Kalurghat. He is dealing with an army that's torn apart between the freedom fighter army officers and the army officers who, mostly no fault of their own, could not join the liberation war because they are imprisoned in West Pakistan, because that's where they happened to be stationed in 1971. So most of them, spent 71 imprisoned in like cantonments and different prisons, and were kept hostage until the various treaties were signed. And so there's this huge tension between the freedom fighter officers who fought in the war and obviously feel this sense of ownership and, like superiority, let's say the word, and who were given 2 years of seniority by the Mujib government, and all these other officers who are coming back from Pakistan because they couldn't participate in the war. The non freedom fighter group is led by a figure now we all know and I dare say despise, Hossein Mohammad Ershad, who was, I think, already a lieutenant colonel when Zia is a major. So, one of the more senior Bengali officers in the Pakistani army. He actually joined the Pakistani war effort with a lot of enthusiasm on the side of Pakistan. He was one of the tribunal judges who used to sit judgment against military officers from Bangladesh who were, in mutiny against the Pakistani army. So anyway, he's brought back Zia.
And also who had actually visited East Pakistan or occupied Bangladesh at least once, if not more, during the war. So whilst it is true that vast majority of officers who were stationed in West Pakistan, then West Pakistan, was in no condition to join the war. So that statement is generally true.
Mhm.
um, some of them escaped. So, for example, Manzoor, who you are going to talk
Yes,
about later, or Taher,
right. In fact, I think
or
they slept together.
they escaped together. Another well-known person is Shariful Haq Dalim, who
Right.
is infamous for announcing the 15th August military coup on radio. So they escaped together. So there were individuals who could escape. So
Right.
there were individuals who could escape. Um, and then
Be
there were also
especially Mutiur Rahman, who tried to fly the
who
jet
tried
out,
to fight the
did not
jet out.
succeed, but
Yeah.
tried.
So yeah. So there were individuals who could or tried. Um, Vast majority were not in a position to do so. Irshad was in a situation where he actually had the opportunity, in the sense that he actually came to East Pakistan, occupied Bangladesh at least once. That is on record. There might have been more that we don't know of, but at least we know that there was at least once he came and visited Rangpur, and therefore I mean, it seems that if you can go all the way to Rangpur to visit your desher bari,
Mhm.
that there would have been a chance to quietly slip out of your, I mean, that's how people joined the war. Nobody joined the war by formally, saying that from, here is my resignation
Yeah.
letter, and I'm going to go and sign over to
You file
Bangladesh
it in
from tomorrow.
triplicate and submit it to the
Exactly, right.
office. Right.
Yeah, so Ershad had chance to join the war. He did not. And yeah, continue.
So, as you alluded, President Zia leaves the post of Chief of Army Staff. He's bringing multi party democracy back to Bangladesh. He starts his nascent political party, BNP. Who should be the next army chief? Which is, as you can imagine, after everything that happened between 75 and 77, a very sensitive decision. The two prime candidates are Major General Munzur and Major General Mir Shaukat, both illustrious, decorated freedom fighters who, as Bangladeshis often have a habit of doing when on the cusp of greatness, become bitter rivals and really torpedo each other's chances. And Zia reaches for a safe option and goes for Ershad, whom he thinks has no base of support within the army, is widely reviled, has many character flaws, which unfortunately Bangladesh got to experience in great detail after Zia's death, and makes Ershad the chief of staff. And this decision really comes back to haunt Zia and is the start of a series of decisions of BNP government appointing army chiefs who don't act the way they think they would act.
True.
Yeah.
Continue. And then the third. So again, so there is a third person in the.
Third person whose face is actually the most prominent in the cover is Major General Abul Munzur. When he becomes Major General, I think he's one of the youngest Major Generals in South Asian history. Like Ziaur Rahman, a Biruttom, um, very talented, very decorated military officer, destined for greatness. Bangladesh had every reason to think he would have a long and illustrious career. But he becomes disenchanted with Zia, firstly, for not being made army chief. Secondly, he feels that his posting in Chittagong, which is really, in a way, the most important military position in Bangladesh at that point, because the GOC of the Chittagong garrison is the point person in fighting the Shanti Bahini uprising in the hill tracts. Munzur already feels like he's being kept out of the corridors of power in Dhaka, and he's anxious to come back to Dhaka. Zia tells him, fine, come back as the commandant of the staff college in Dhaka. Munjur takes that as a further slight because the commandant is a major general, he is a senior figure, he does not have a command. So he takes that as a huge snub. There is a tradition in the Bangladeshi army that it only moves when there is a lot of unity and almost unanimous consent to move in a certain course of action, which we may have seen in 2007 or 2024. In 1981, the book alludes to the fact that maybe some type of unanimity springs up between Munjur and Ershad, two people who should by nature hate each other, but seemed to have arrived at a tactical alliance.
Just pause for a sec.
Yes.
Uh, Before getting into the theories of the book, just give a maybe just very quickly give a summary of the book before we get to that, what the book alludes to. So just give the reader what the book is, and then we get to the what we allude to.
Book starts in 75. Zia has just become the chief of staff. The army is in fragments and there is no discipline. He restores discipline, jumps back, jumps forward to 81. He is now the president in control. He has restored discipline to the army and to the country. He is flying to Chittagong to resolve this dispute that we talk about. He has a very hectic
Which is a
day.
historical fact so far.
These are all historical facts.
Yeah.
He has a very hectic day where he, spends time with the various BNP factions nonstop. He takes quick breaks to go to Jumma. It's a Friday. Has quick meals and otherwise is locked in this meeting room where people are just complaining to him and on. During that night, he is guarded by just 12 members of the President's Guard Regiment. His military ADC is in the room beside him. At around 3 a.m., a convoy of two trucks storm into the circuit house. They blow up the gate with a bazooka and also, send the police guarding the circuit house running. The soldiers storm up to the second floor. They don't go to any other room of the circuit house, where, as I alluded, the entire BNP or most of the BNP standing committee is there. They go straight to Zia's room. As Zia, no one ever disputed his personal bravery. He comes out of his room, and Lieutenant Colonel Mutiur Rahman, who really seems to be the linchpin of this whole assassination, who was in Dhaka 4 days before this and met Ershad, shoots Zia with his 10 gun, badly disfigures Zia, and leaves the body lying on the floor. And then they just rush out.
Hmm.
And the entire machine of the Bangladeshi army and the government just comes to a standstill. And no one knows what's happening. The next day,
And so far this is broadly consistent with historical record as we understand it, based on various government documents, right? This is
correct.
white
Although
papers published by the government documents and so on.
although the book said, and I was able to verify a little bit, there was an official investigation done of this murder, not by the army, which, conducted its own tribunal and sentenced, I think, 13 officers to death.
Hmm.
The civilian bureaus, the police, and the bureaucracy conducted its own investigation, which probably had a very, maybe more holistic take on what happened. That report was never released, has
I
never
see.
been released
Right.
yet.
Hmm. Okay. All right.
The
Go on.
next day, everyone's waking up in Chittagong in a state of shock. Everyone is waking up in Dhaka in a state of shock. Vice President Abdul Sattar is, according to the book, unwell and he was actually in CMH, just recuperating.
That's true. As in, this is also on record that has been well, reported in various media of that time,
Correct.
that the vice president, which is why he was not in Chittagong to begin with.
Correct.
Yeah,
Probably this is where we stray from facts to speculation. Ershad convenes a meeting of the generals who are in Dhaka and tries to subtly float the idea of martial law, never from him directly, but the other officers, even those Ershad thought would support him, surprise him by all sort of saying that, we should go to Sattar's bedside. You should go to Sattar's bedside and support him. Um, Nuruddin Khan is there, who's then the chief of general staff, the second person in the army, and would then, become the army chief himself in a later tumultuous time. Major General Mohammad Jan Chaudhry is there, the director of DGFI. General Abdul Rashid is there, and various other generals. Ershad goes to Sattar's bedside, actually. Sattar does then give a speech in the radio, and he says that, this is a tragedy. Our president has been assassinated. I
So
am the
let's
acting
just
president. Yeah.
pause a sec here. So both according to the book, as well as what we know historically, as in like as we know from public media and government documents and so on, the news of Zia's assassination is um, announced by Dhaka radio first or Chittagong radio first. It's actually announced by Radio Bangladesh, as in Bangladesh Betar from Dhaka officially, right? That the
So
president
the
has.
book has an interesting, like a parallel sequence of events. The
Right,
army officers show up very early in Chittagong, and they put out that announcement in Chittagong, and then they say there's a Biplobi Command Council.
right. Yes,
I wasn't sure whether that was heard all over Bangladesh or just around Chittagong.
right. So somebody has to. I couldn't actually. I could never actually fathom this myself. Going through various books and so on. That what was the actual sequence, right? That I know that Irshad did go to Sattar and say that, okay, we abide by the army abides by the constitution, and we are under your command.
Right.
So that bit is correct. We also know that before doing so there was a meeting of the commanders. That bit is also in various books. So for
Hmm.
example, Major General Moinul Hasan Chaudhuri writes in his memoir,
Hmm.
right? um, and what you have just speculated is also mentioned, in so it's more than speculation that basically that in the idea of martial law never floated directly by Ershad, but that it's also something that if somebody if it's not something he would have been averse to if there were support for it, but he became quite it became very quite it became quite clear that the army top brass was not interested in taking over. It was very clear
Yet,
that yet it was very clear that army top brass respected Zia, and they did not want to be seen as we killed Zia and are taking over. This is
right,
not something they wanted to be seen as any part of. And then there was, of course, the repatriate versus freedom fighter issues within the army, and also repatriates were not a homogeneous group, nor
right.
were the freedom fighters. There were a lot of interpersonal rivalry within each group. So, for example, um, Major General Golam Dastagir and Major General Abdur Rahman were two senior repatriate officers who
Mhm.
did not think much of Ershad
Right,
because of his very well-known character flaws. And obviously, Manzoor was freedom fighter. Shaukat Ali was also freedom fighter, and Shaukat Ali thought that, well, okay, Manzoor is, why Manzoor is should be the chief, I should be the chief, and so on, right? And so on. So the army was not unified by any means, and therefore army did not want to take over. So this is also something we know. What I never could actually get to really understand was that the sequence of announcements, that whether it was from Chittagong that the first announcement came, it would make sense, right? That you have killed the president, you want to take over, you should announce. I mean, what's the point otherwise?
Agreed. I think the transmitter in Chittagong, like now that I'm thinking about it, probably did not have the bandwidth to go all
To
over
go
Bangladesh. They
manually,
would,
right?
Bangladesh does a lot of gatekeeping about these things.
Right.
Like, no, that should only be in Dhaka.
Okay.
So then
So
the
they
whole
probably did announce something Biplobi Sarkar,
they
but
did,
then and that probably was heard only around Chittagong.
right?
But then the Dhaka radio picked it up, and then army officers figured out, okay, what do we do about this? And then they went and told Sattar, and then Sattar went and said that that the constitution is, in effect, and there has been a national tragedy and all of those things. Is that how you say it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the other theme that's running through this book is, like everyone's very mystified about the concept of a coup being launched outside Dhaka. And, obviously it's a grim day, but everyone's
Mhm.
also like in Chittagong. I mean, what will they do in Chittagong? And during the day, again, you will tell me whether this is history or speculation. The If I have to pick one word to describe Bonjour throughout the book, it's flailing. He is not in command. He is lost. He he is reacting to events. He doesn't have a plan. The one detail the book insists on is that they're continuously calling him from Dhaka and asking, for God's sake, speak to General Ershad. And he is just like angrily flinging the phone away. So if I go further into the, land of speculation, you don't do something in Chittagong without some assurance that there will be countervailing forces acting in alignment in Dhaka. And if I read this book now and try to parse the text, I think this is what's stumping Munjur. That, there should be corresponding events happening in Dhaka that are not happening, which means that he is slowly realizing that he has been made a cat's paw, a tool, and
This
he will be
sugar.
the front man who has to take the blame,
Okay.
right?
So if I understand your speculation, you are saying that the game might have been that um, Motiur would pull the trigger um, in and kill Zia. So that's the
Right.
actual. He's the actual dog of war.
Right.
Um, Manzoor is just the commander. He just happens to be the Chittagong GOC, but um,
That's going too easy on him. I think he was sympathetic to Zia being taken out of the picture.
they are being taken out of the picture.
Right.
The coup would actually then be led in Dhaka.
Right.
That now that Zia is dead, the government has obviously fallen. The generals would meet in Dhaka
Right.
and would decide that army has to take over to save the nation. And obviously that government would be it would be a junta, it would be a joint regime
Right.
in which Manzoor would be. So Manzoor at that stage probably would have, by that point, So your speculation is that Manzoor would have reached some kind of understanding with Ershad.
I think,
That
right. Like Monzur expected some type of like welcome or some type of opening from Dhaka. There is this illusion that's made early on the morning of 30th May that the army chief and the home minister will get on a helicopter and come to Chittagong. And that
right.
obviously never happens. So I think they expected some type of opening in Dhaka. And then, or if
So
Monsoor
here another
shows up,
interesting thing: the home minister. um, uh,
Colonel Mustafizur
Colonel
Rahman.
Mustafizur Rahman. So the background here is that Colonel Mustafizur Rahman was actually Zia's uh, uh, senior in military intelligence back in the early 60s.
I see.
Right. So when Zia was a captain before the 1965 war, so this is, I think, we're going back to the 1962 or 63. So I think this is before Zia was even married, or even uh, or or even if he was married before his children were born. So very young Zia. So Colonel Mustafiz was, I think, his senior at that time. So they go back way back. And Colonel Mustafiz, this being military intelligence, Colonel Mustafiz had a lot of those kind of backgrounds, right?
Right.
So that allusion is quite interesting, that the army chief and the home minister would come and so on. So if Manzoor was expecting those kind of things, that is quite telling too, right?
Right.
That if there was a, yeah, that, which obviously did not happen. And
Exactly.
also, interestingly, that Mustafiz had shown no interest in breaking from BNP and joining Ershad throughout the 80s. A lot of BNP leaders left Khaleda Zia and joined Jatiyo Party in the 80s. Mustafiz was not one of them. He, I think he became
He
foreign
became
minister
foreign minister, yes,
in
under the
the
Khaleda Zia.
90s, in the Khaleda Zia,
Mhm.
and then basically retired, I think, in the in the
He
late 90s.
passed away in the late 90s.
In the late 90s. And so
Right.
basically had a fairly non-controversial post 81
Correct.
political career, right? Like,
Right.
in the scheme of things, right?
Right.
So yeah, yeah, go on. Yeah.
So that's happening. And or if we think of a counter scenario, if there is, some type of a military council government and all the GOCs are brought to Dhaka, again, it would be Monjur who would be the most, like the dominant person because he is the person who has killed the previous president. So he is, the major person who has brought this situation to pass. But neither of those happen. He is not allowed to come to Dhaka. No one from Dhaka goes to him. 30th passes in a sort of a stalemate. And then something very interesting happens. After Monzur, the next senior officer in Chittagong is Hanan Shah, who is then the commandant of the Bangladesh Military Academy in Patiari. And this really shows that how you don't need a command to play a crucial role. You just need your wits around you. So Monzur, calls everyone out and he's telling everyone to touch the Quran, take the oath, show allegiance to him. Hanansha just says that no, I'm not under your command. I have a separate role here, and my role is to make sure that the cadets are safe. And now he goes back to BMA. And then by
And just pause here for a sec. It's also Handan Shah, just to give our audience a bit of context. Hanan Shah is a very interesting, individual, both politically but also his militarily, or so. The book says, and it's also relayed in other books as well. We talked about repatriated officers and their views around 71 and so on, right? So Handan Shah's views around 1971 is quite interesting in that he thinks of many of the freedom fighter officers quite dimly, right? He
right,
thinks that these officers violated an oath, that whatever is the merits or demerits of Bangladeshi nationalism vis-a-vis Pakistan, that you do not And this includes, the actions that Zia himself took. That you do not.
And Hanan Shah as well, right? He was also a freedom fighter.
No, he was not a freedom fighter.
He was not a freedom fighter. Oh, okay.
He was not a freedom fighter. He himself was a repatriate,
I
right?
see.
And he basically says that, well, like, all of you who defected from, you mutinied, and you do
Yeah.
not mutiny, right? You have taken an oath, and your job is to follow orders. You do
Mm,
not mutiny. You under no circumstances mutiny, right? So
right.
that was, you are an army officer, you take an oath and you follow your order, right? So that was his black and white view of the world,
Right.
right? Now fast forward to 1976, when the Zia regime comes under threat in the Bogura mutiny,
Mm,
led by Colonel Farouk and Colonel Rashid,
right.
the Mujib killers, right? So they come back, and they had been exiled to Libya in 1970, in the November, out during the November Khalid Musharraf coup. Khalid Musharraf sends them abroad,
Right.
and so on. So they come back from Libya in 76. They want to lead a mutiny against Zia. So they base themselves in Bogura, and now they are marching on to Dhaka. Hanan Shah goes to quell that, right?
Right.
Right.
And does
And
kill
again,
that.
and does quell that,
Right.
right? And so, sort of, so Hanan Shah is actually following his North Star, which is that, okay. And Hanan Shah, by the way, in 71 was senior to Zia because of
Mm,
the way things were, I mean, like, he was
right.
senior officer to Zia. In 76, Zia has obviously superseded him because of the war and all of that. And Hanan Shah is like, okay, that's how life is, that's how it is. My general is asking me to put these guys down. They are the mutineers. I'm going to put them down. I was part of Pakistan army. Now I'm part of Bangladesh army, and I'm following my command, and I'm doing that. Fast
Well,
forward.
you have to wonder whether he took some type of perverse, pleasure in
Hmm.
putting down two freedom fighters, but I
Well,
speculate. Yeah.
yeah, sure. Fast forward to 1981, and this. He eventually joins BNP. So we'll come back to this,
Right.
but I'm just giving the context. Fast forward to his post-military life, he joins BNP politics, and then he becomes a steadfast defender of BNP politics against the 111 regime,
Yes.
um, and democratic politics. So a very interesting character all throughout, right?
Elected multiple times from Gazipur, served as state minister in the first Khalajia government. And yes, like after Y11, when, defenders of BNP were very scarce, a columnist in Prathamala actually wrote, like, it's as if, like, you see in like Sufi poems that a defender just appears in a puff of smoke. That's how Hanan Shah, like he was nowhere in national politics, but all of a sudden became a steadfast defender and really took a lot of personal danger and exposure to steadfastly defend Qaeda during that time.
There you go. There you go. So go back to 1981. So what does he do in the book?
So he is really the first person who voices the disquiet that the rank and file in Chittagong are feeling. In that, like they can't tell their officers that, or their general officer commanding, that you did something wrong because it's
Hmm.
still the army. All they can do is, be like stoic and not show any enthusiasm. But Hanan Shah sort of breaks out from that, tells Munzur that I am no part of this, I want no part of this, goes back to BMA, and then is called back because his Nuruddin Khan is his mama by familial relations.
Hmm.
So he opens the channel between Dhaka and Chittagong and starts to negotiate an amnesty, which is, far removed from the dreams of the Revolutionary Council, and Munzur saying how Zia has become too pro India and Islam needs to be a more dominant facet of life in Bangladesh. and Zia has become corrupt. Basically, things that we can
The
tell
boilerplate stuff, right?
exactly with the hindsight of history. So once news gets out that this now the talk is of amnesty and negotiations are happening, military units start deserting the Chittagong cantonment, going over the Bhuapur bridge into Kumilla, where the cantonment has still remained loyal to Dhaka. And Munzur could not block that bridge. That was one of his command failures. So he rapidly sees like his artillery unit and other units just deserting him. He decides in the middle of the night that he's done. So he makes a run of it with his wife, with his four children, some other officers who were part of the assassination, including Motiur Rahman. The convoy breaks down. Motiur Rahman is killed in a gunfight. Monzur is arrested by the police.
Monsoon surrenders himself to the police, doesn't he not?
Monzur, his wife, his four children, and I think one other officer are walking because their convoy has broken down. They stop at dawn at a like a tea estate um, village where they're feeding the children, and they realize that they're surrounded by the police and they hear barking dogs. So they send people and find like a SI. And Munzur tells the SI that I am Major General Abul Munzur. I am surrendering to you. Make sure I'm not taken back to military custody. And the police say, Sir, you are surrendering to us. We're taking you to the, I think, Hathajari Thana.
Mhm.
And then Ershad learns of it, sends his people with trucks to arrest Munzur. The police hold out for a long time. They go to the IGP, they go to Sattar, and Sattar is swayed by Ershad. And Sattar tells the police that no, he has to be handed over. So they still make the officers sign like a, like an official paper saying that I am now taking custody of Major General Mansoor. And then he's driven away, taken to a field in the middle of the cantonment, and assassinated with a single gunshot to the head.
Which is the title, Tityo Khuner Kahini.
Right.
So the book is actually not about the assassination of Ziaur Rahman as such. It is about the assassination of General Mansour,
Correct.
and it's the second murder, the story of the second murder.
Exactly. Yes. That is the second murder.
And as I said, it's being recorded on 2nd of June your time, 3rd of June in Dhaka, and I think Mansour was killed on 2nd of June,
1st
first
June.
1st of June. Okay,
Well, so 30th May, 31st May. Yes, 1st of June.
1st of June. Okay, okay. So that's the broadly what happened, and the book is, there is a bit of speculation. There's a lot of allusion. I wouldn't say speculation. The book leaves it to the reader to speculate, right?
Right. And, we need to place the book in its context as well. The book is coming out in 2015, probably in one of the darkest years of the Hasina regime, where, the name Ziaur Rahman was a dirty word. And
2015. So uh, this is when the regime is probably at its strongest. So we have she has just she has pulled off the first election, and there is absolutely no chance of you know uh, her resigning after that. Um, the Salahuddin Ahmed has been abducted. Ilyas Ali is long forgotten. Khaleda Zia is interned. Tariq Rahman is banned from media formally.
yes,
Nobody even would publish a Ziaur Rahman related article in the media, unless
Rad
you
is on a
say that
rampage.
is a, yeah, yep, absolutely, Rab is on a rampage. um yeah, so sort of anything that you are going to write about Ziaur Rahman has to be said that, like, he was a military dictator, uh who established fundamentalism in Bangladesh, and and probably was linked with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's assassination, and all sorts of everything that had gone wrong in Bangladesh in the last 50 years. Unless you said all of those things, you couldn't even say the words Ziaur Rahman, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So the book came out in 2015, you were saying?
The
Yeah.
book came out in 2015. I, to be fair, given everything you said, the book is not warm to Zia, but it also does not excessively malign him. And it doesn't need to. It very cleverly starts the day of his death. So it can avoid, the policy issues and just sort of give the like a thriller type blow by blow exposition and details, and then slips into, what happened in the aftermath,
Hmm.
where if anything, you are sort of painting Ershad as the villain, which probably also dovetailed nicely with Hasina's agenda to keep Ershad under pressure. As we know, the Munzur murder case was used to do so.
So quickly, so we're looking at time. We plan to do these things for an hour, but we have now looking at 1 hour and 36 minutes. But still, we're having fun. So quickly tell us about the Monsoon murder case.
Munzur murder case was filed in. So obviously, Ershad launches his long awaited, nourished coup in 1982, forces President Sattar, who was elected, duly elected, got his own mandate, forces him off power after a hours long standoff where Sattar, is basically abandoned by the Bangladeshi deep state and
So the
finds.
standoff happens in 1982 when Ershad's um, 4 year term for military chief comes to an end, right?
Right.
So Ershad was made the army chief in 78 when Zia ran for presidency. So Zia was made army chief in 75 after the August 75 coup. So after Shofiullah, Zia became the army chief,
With
and
chief of defense staff over him for a
over
while.
him for a
Right.
while, and
And the
then
defense advisor, J.L.
and then the
Osmani.
defense advisor and all of that, and then the November 75 uprising happened and all the rest of it, etc., etc. So when Zia civilianized his regime and democratized it in 78, he made Ershad the army chief with a 4 year term, which would have expired in April 78,
Mm.
right?
82.
Sorry, April 82. So he was made the army chief. Ershad was made the army chief in April 78. So it would have expired in April 82. So in March 82, Sattar makes a decision that Ershad's term would not be renewed,
Mm.
right? Um, you know,
Right.
as per normal process, he had served his term, then there would be somebody else. There's no particular reason to renew it. In fact, one of the differences between India and Pakistan in the 50s was that the Ayub Khan kept getting his army chief position, renewed again and again, and many scholars had pointed to that as a big factor why Pakistan ended up having a military coup and India did
Mm.
not. That,
Right.
like, Nehru did not keep renewing his army chiefs. So
And even
so
after the 71 war, where the Indian army was at the height of its prestige, Mrs.
Manik
Gandhi
Shah.
still, Manekshaw, didn't
Yeah,
give him another renewal. So
renewal,
yes,
exactly. Yeah. So sort of, so Sattar and cabinet very sensibly decided that, well, okay, when Ershad's term is up, it will be somebody else. And so when this news reached the cantonment, Ershad said that, well, okay, we're not going to have it. And so there was a standoff, and basically Ershad laid a siege of the
Bangabhavan.
Banga Bhavan, and said that, okay,
Yeah,
you resign
or
else
else. Mhm.
or else. And this continued for, I think
More
for
36 hours, I think,
yeah
almost.
for so yeah for a long period of time,
Right.
until basically Sattar relented.
Realized no one was coming to
No
the
one was coming.
rescue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go. Yeah.
So then Irshad clings on for 9 years, launches another, backtracks from Zia's multi party democracy, launches his dictatorship, is ousted by the movement of 1990s. Khaida Zia is elected prime minister in 91. In 95, the government allows General Munzur's oldest brother, I think, who is a lawyer, to file a case in a murder case that names a lot of unnamed people as suspects, and prominent amongst them after the police investigation is Ershad. I think you told me this story that, or you can tell the story of what Modud said in Parliament then.
Yes. So was it? I think it was actually slightly before 1995, wasn't it?
I think 95. I looked
Because
this data up.
you look this data. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So okay. So Modud is said to have said that the BNP government, instead of uh, instead of um, trying Ziaur Rahman's murderers, is trying Ziaur Manzoor's murderer.
Is
So that
trying
was
the murders of those who murdered Ziaur Rahman.
That's right.
Yeah,
জিয়াউর রহমানের হত্যাকারীর বিচার না করে হত্যাকারীর হত্যাকারীকে বিচার করা হচ্ছে.
right, right.
I get into Bangla because it's actually sounds better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, while a lot of the corruption cases fell away, this case had incontrovertible evidence, especially, the way Munzur was taken out of police custody and then shot at point blank range. So Hasina kept this alive. And, this case would very nicely dovetail with Ershad's military career or political career when he was the junior partner to Hasina. As long as he was, doing whatever Hasina wanted, this case would be dormant. Anytime he showed any deviation from Awami League line, suddenly a date would be set for the next status conference, or a new judge would be appointed, and headlines would show up about this case. And this was used to really, keep him in check until Eshad's own death.
So in a sense, the Manzoor's death haunted Ershad. Manzoor's
Absolutely.
ghost haunted Ershad right towards his very end,
Very last days.
very last days. Um, we can speculate, but we would probably these are probably things that we can speculate, but I wonder if we'll ever really get to know.
Well, there's this old saying, truth is the daughter of time. So I'm hopeful in time more will be revealed.
Hopefully, I think. Meanwhile, 1 hour and 45 minutes. We probably should call it a time for today.
Exactly. But thank you.
Okay,
This was a great discussion.
this was good fun. Like and subscribe buttons. We should point to those. Please hit, please click. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you.